Hi, and welcome to my 170th podcast on my long-running, maybe 10-year series or something like that. This is Gary Mitchell. This podcast is brought to you by Ignition from Inductive Automation, and this is Gary's thoughts on manufacturing. Once again, returning from yet another trip, I was 4 days with Rockwell Automation. First on Monday, part of Tuesday, went to what they call PSUG, Process Solutions Users Group. And Rockwell's Process Solutions is growing. It's not ever going to be one of those gigantic fast growth things, just given the industry. But they seem to be doing pretty well, and they get more and more applications in oil and gas and other things. And so I spent time at PSUG. They had a special media day on Tuesday morning where they had international conglomeration of journalists that came in for some thought leadership pieces, which were interesting this year. Well, I mean, there's been 20 of them, and they're always pretty interesting. And then 2 days of what's called Automation Fair, which is started out as just like a trade show, and now there's a lot of training and forums and other things going on at the same time. Never heard about attendance. It was probably not quite the same, but it was in Houston, which is centered on oil and gas. Don't know if anybody didn't come to Houston because of the hurricane aftermath, although it didn't impact anything we did. Nothing at all. So that part of Houston bouncing back nicely, and it was probably good for them to get all that tourism back. So speaking of Rockwell Automation, the elephant not in the room was the unsolicited acquisition offer by Emerson. David Farr has, first it was like a leak, and it was leaked in St. Louis, so it must have been an Emerson leak. And then they just came out publicly that Emerson really wants Rockwell. And they've offered, the latest offer that I've heard is $29 billion for Rockwell, which is a premium, of course. I mean, you have to offer some kind of a premium over stock price or deals not going to get done. But my take on this, and I'm not a financial analyst, I just look at finances, but it looks to me like, Emerson is a couple of things. Emerson has been built on consolidation. They started out consolidating things, and they sort of like to consolidate, at least in the automation side, that part of the industry. Now, I realize that Emerson has been divesting a lot of stuff, so not looking at their balance sheet, they probably have some capital. But really, as a corporation, I don't think it's been performing necessarily all that well the last few years. And so this is probably something that CEO David Farr feels that he's got to do to make a big splash, big growth. Rockwell's a $6.3 billion company, and so it's a big fish to swallow. Most people who have looked at Rockwell said it's just too big to absorb. Can't do it. I don't know what David Farr thinks that he's better than anybody else, that he can absorb them. It would be interesting. What would be even more interesting would be if they did the merger and Farr became chairman of a new Rockwell Emerson Rockwell company, and that Blake Moret became the CEO. That I think that would be fascinating. I don't know that it would happen. Anyway, nobody really was talking to it. I had an interview with, among other people, Ted Crandall, who had been CFO for a while. I didn't ask him directly because I'm not going to get an answer, but you could tell there was no. They were just going on business as usual. The board rejected the offer. The board just doesn't see a value. Rockwell's stock price has been climbing for the last few years, so obviously the investors like Rockwell and what it's doing. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll see if Farr's persistent. I just saw something that my friend Jim Cahill, who's Emerson's chief blogger, put out there on LinkedIn with the PowerPoint presentation about what a good deal it would be and all the synergies, which usually means you lay off a ton of people. Although in one of the PowerPoints in the fine print at the bottom it said synergies can be more than just laying off people. But typically you look at all the back office stuff, and he was talking about getting sales synergies, which means maybe I could get rid of some salespeople. That's usually how you pay for acquisitions, among other ways. So, and if Rockwell's got cash laying around, you use that to pay for it too, and then you've got a bigger company, which almost never works. By the way, um, I think people have done studies. I'm not going to. Anyway, there were just a couple of side conversations I had on the whole Rockwell Emerson thing, which was basically non-news to what was going on. Uh, at the media day, one of the most like moving parts of the thing, emotionally moving. Now, I'm really aware of Rockwell Training. Rockwell really can train well. I have been to, in my own personal experience, I've been to control school, PLC school, drive school, motor control center school, a couple software schools, and I know how they train, and I know they're very thorough. And I know that workforce is a big issue for manufacturers, as in finding skilled workforce. So combining the two, along with a company called Manpower, and Manpower recruits people, so they're good at screening people, bringing in, figuring out where they might be able to be placed. So the two companies, Rockwell and Manpower, kind of came together, and they just ran through the first pilot training. Oh, and darn it, I didn't write this down. I think there were 14 veterans. This is targeted to veterans. So people who in the military service had some technical background of one kind or another. And so they're trainable, they disciplined, they know how to get up and go to work, and all those basic skills, and they're trained in teamwork also. And so they're just getting specific training in automation technologies. And so they had four in front of us that spoke about their new careers now. They've been out of the military. Trying to find a job is difficult, and now they're really trained, and it was quite moving. And the class will expand, and they'll have more of them. They'll have more than one training center. It's a big commitment on the part of the student. They have to move too, because it's a 3 month training. So it's kind of like college. You get up and you move, and you go there and you take the training, and knowing Rockwell Training is very intense, but very good. Uh, Going on to some of the other things, I had 7 hours worth of interviews in all kinds of different booths. Talked safety and a little bit of new stuff with safety, but mostly it was catching up with applications. And I interviewed some people from Honda of Canada who won one of Rockwell's safety awards, and that's pretty cool. Rockwell's been doing this for a few years now. Off and on, I've worked closely with the safety people to learn more about what they're doing and support these efforts like Plan of the Year and so on. But that was interesting. Most of what I talked about had to do with software. Software is a big thing. A friend of mine just wrote to me over the weekend that innovation right now in our industry is software. Hardware, they're doing stuff, and hardware is still moving along, but innovation is coming in software, and Rockwell just flooded me with software stuff. So one was there's like a new openness with Rockwell Software, and one of the things I talked to for about 45 minutes worth of conversation on OPC UA. Rockwell has not been a very big OPC supporter, even though Tom Burke, who's president of OPC Foundation and wrote the original OPC stuff while he was at Rockwell. But Rockwell as a corporation strategy just kind of shied away from things like that and kind of did their own thing. But now, as their software has really come together and they're putting all the pieces together, and it's a pretty darn comprehensive suite these days, they're opening up the platform, and OPC UA is a really good way to do it. So I talked a lot about their openness with OPC UA, a module that has OPC UA built in, embedded, and clients and servers both. They didn't talk anything about PubSub OPC, so I don't think they're ready to take the next step to the cloud yet, but they're getting there. So Rockwell's doing well. When I talked to John Genovese, who's vice president over both process and information technology, and Paula Puce, who's the director of marketing for software, the key word they wanted to get across was scalability. So I'm going to mention scalability. did I say scalability? And it's their new analytics platform, and you can't really do Internet of Things without analytics to have a whole package. And the new analytics looks to be very well done. All I saw was a demo, and but the demo was cool in the sense of underneath they bought a couple of small companies that was actually acqui-hires that could write all the analytics underneath the covers, so to speak. But they made it very, very easy to use. You could just put it out there, and people in operations and maintenance and engineers that are focused on process can put together queries and things and get a usable interface that right away to see what's going on. The analytics was way cool. It's not out until the first of the year, but it looks really good. And in typical of Rockwell, they're trying to scale it from the small OEM to their large industrial users, people like PepsiCo. I don't know that they're using it, but that's an example of a big Rockwell customer. They have many large corporations. So once again, a packed house, a lot of people around, a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of stuff coming out of Rockwell. But the process stuff is coming along pretty good, very interesting. Software definitely is growing like crazy, and the training is just fantastic. The way it's a whole program now of bringing veterans in and training them, and giving these guys a chance at a second career after they get out of the military. So a lot of cool stuff. And on the backside, we'll just keep watching to see if Emerson's successful in persuading the board to accept their offer. The way institutions invest these days, it's hard to go to individual shareholders unless they happen to know a couple of the large institutions who want to dump their stock. Doesn't appear like they do right now. So we'll see what happens. It's all, it's all part of business, I guess. So anyway, this podcast is brought to you by Ignition from Inductive Automation. This is Gary Mitchell, podcast number 170.